Bleach has always had a large fan following and a long runtime, due to which it was placed under the umbrella of the Big Three, a nickname used to refer to Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach, a trio of immensely popular anime worldwide. Bleach itself has always been known for its amazing fights, thrilling developments, and the plethora of overpowered characters that inhabit the world. From the world of the living to Soul Society to the depths of Hyuko Mundo, there is no shortage of beings that can break your mind with their sheer power. One such being was introduced back in chapter 65 of the manga, Zaraki KENPACHI, although he looked less intimidating at the time and more of a muscle-headed buffoon. This formidable being was introduced as the captain of the 11th Division of the Gotei 13, and he certainly lived up to the position. His badass personality, intimidating aura, and strength made him an instant fan favorite after his first time being seen in battle. Fanboying aside, let's delve further into the history of the 11th KENPACHI. Oh, and spoilers ahead. When Ichigo Kurosaki and company first infiltrate Soul Society to rescue Rukia Kuchiki, they're met with numerous strong foes. One among these was Zaraki KENPACHI. After learning about the infiltrators, Zaraki headed out to fight the strongest among them and determined that to be Ichigo. His Reiatsu, spiritual pressure, was so tremendous that it initially threw off our hero. The being stood like an insurmountable obstacle in front of Ichigo. Zaraki was incredibly intimidating, with his unruly character design. His height, ripped frame, spiky hair, and long, jagged blade all added to the intimidation factor. Zaraki had immense spiritual pressure and a love for fighting. His skin seemed impenetrable and his attacks were overpowering, taking Ichigo quite a large amount of effort to defeat him. It's worth nothing that this fight took place while Zaraki was wearing an eye patch that suppressed his spiritual power and vision, as well as bells on the tips of his spiky hair to give his opponent an advantage. Without those two items, he finds that he'd be just too strong to enjoy the fight, so he basically nerfs himself. Ichigo did eventually defeat Zaraki, but then later we learned that that wasn't the height of his power, because of course it isn't. Continuing on that point, let's delve through Zaraki's history. Zaraki came from District 80, which was called Zaraki. He never had a name, so he simply took his district's name as his own. This district was the overly aggressive slum of Soul Society, where murder was like going out for a stroll in the park. Zaraki molded himself to survive in a place as horrid as that, and acquired his Zanpakuto from a dead Shinigami. All the killing and fights made him quite skilled, to the point where he easily dispatched anything and everything, which became quite boring. Like Saitama, he was basically overpowered. Until eventually he met Retsu Unohana, who was the captain of the 11th Division at the time and wielded the title of KENPACHI. The title is given to only the strongest Shinigami, and there can be only one KENPACHI per generation. You have to kill the current wielder to gain the title. Pretty hardcore. Unohana was the only one who actually gave Zaraki a run for his money, along with his iconic scar. Zaraki was defeated after a gruesome fight, but we later learned that he subconsciously suppressed his power during the fight because he was enjoying it too much and felt he could never have a fight like that again if he slaughtered Unohana. Keep in mind that his Zanpakuto was also suppressed at the time. I'll get to that portion in a bit. Later on, he took the name KENPACHI when he stumbled onto the current Yachiru Kusajishi and named her after Unohana, the only person he admired. She was once called Yachiru Unohana. He later met Ikkaku Madarame, and the two ended up fighting, with Zaraki beating him to a pulp and creating a lasting impression and admiration with Ikkaku. We learned at the time that Zaraki wasn't a fan of finishing off his opponents when they were too banged up to fight. He then joined the Gotei 13 as a captain by killing the current captain of the 11th Division, KENPACHI Kiganjo, in a single blow. Also, no idea how this guy is the 10th KENPACHI, even though the first KENPACHI, Unohana, is still alive. Considering that you have to kill the current KENPACHI to inherit the title, it seemed a little odd that there were others. But I'll stop nitpicking for a bit. So yeah, manslaughter is allowed and you can get a government position through it. Soul Society is neat. Considering how strong he is, Zaraki doesn't actually have a refined battle style, unless he calls slashing the opponent repeatedly refined. Zaraki tends to go headfirst into battle with his nerfs while giving his opponents ample opportunities to stab or cut him, if they can. Just like in his fight with Noitra Gilga, he initially can't cut the Arrancar, but keeps slashing ferociously until he eventually does penetrate his skin. Neutra is so tough, in fact, that Zaraki resorts to using both hands to hold a sword, instead of the usual one-handed swinging. We learn then that he knows Kendo. The fight that was giving him a tough time before ends in a single two-handed slash, further solidifying how strong he is. Okay, up until now, Zaraki has been beating foes left and right without truly having a match. But that all changed when the Wanderreichs attacked. Zaraki starts off with dispatching a few Sternritters before facing the leader Yuach, actually Royd Lloyd. Zaraki charges at him but gets defeated and bloodied with ease. The fake Yuach even mocks how weak the Kenpachi is before Yamamoto Genryusai, our local old overpowered badass, steps in and saves Zaraki. After recovering, Zaraki is taken by Unohana for some training, which is basically a battle to the death. The two fight and Unohana repeatedly knocks out and wounds Zaraki before healing him. Each time he recovers, the limits he placed on himself back in their first fight are released and he grows exceedingly stronger until eventually he impales Unohana, even with her Bankai active, and kills her. He is saddened and enraged at her death when he hears his Zanpakuto calling out to him. After that, he goes back to the battle with Quincy and faces Gremmy the Mo. The Quincy is incredibly strong and he keeps healing any damage Zaraki gives. During this fight, when Gremmy summons a meteor, we finally learn the name of Zaraki's Zanpakuto, Nozarashi, aka Weather Beaten. Zaraki jumps towards the meteor, and the next thing we know, the meteor is in pieces and Zaraki is standing with a humongous axe in his hand, having unleashed his Shikai. Zaraki proceeds to defeat Gremmy, albeit Gremmy trying to imagine himself as stronger than Zaraki. And his body couldn't take the power. It was convoluted to say the least, but hey, we'll count that as a win. Later on, he has to get healed, loses his arm, and is healed again before facing Gerard Valkyrie, the heart of the Soul King. Zaraki has an incredibly tough time facing Gerard, even with Byakuya and Hitsugaya as backup. I say backup quite loosely because he doesn't actually let them interfere in the fight. Gerard eventually overpowers and knocks down Zaraki, which makes him visualize his Zanpakuto as Yachiru before he unleashes his Bankai. Zaraki gains red skin and an absurd amount of power. He ends up cutting down the Goliath before his power breaks his own arm. The three captains do win eventually, but that was the first and last time we saw Zaraki's Bankai. Recollecting everything Zaraki has gone through in the series, we can assess that he has truly been a powerhouse his entire time. Zaraki was on par with captains of the Gotei 13 long before he even knew his Zanpakuto's name. His spiritual pressure was so strong that it suppressed his own blade, and when he finally bonded with his Zanpakuto, Zaraki was put on a whole other level. He was never formally trained for more than a day because of fear that he may grow too strong and become a threat to Soul Society. He was the only person to ever become a captain of the Gotei 13 while not even knowing how to release his Zanpakuto. Zaraki was definitely among the strongest to grace the world of Bleach. We've talked about Zaraki's past, his numerous battles, his abilities, and his feats, but of course, there's always more to discuss with world and character building as expansive as Bleach. We did get a few main fights out of the way, but maybe we'll delve further into his fights with other captains and other opponents. Well, that wraps up this journey where a nameless outlaw turned into one of the strongest beings in Bleach. We'll be sure to provide more information on other characters and further insights, recaps, and theories that revolve around Bleach, as well as other animes for your viewing pleasure. If you enjoyed it, drop us a like and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for more on the next video. Peace.